Hey there, pen fans. This is Dave. And a while back in May, I did a video on this pen here. It was the introduction of a long-term evaluation of this pen where I did some pictures of the pen and did a writing sample. And I'll put a link to that up here in the corner. And this is the conclusion after using this pen exclusively for 4 weeks. I didn't use any other pens during that period of time and used a variety of different papers and also different inks with those different papers. So quite a bit of matrix there. This is the conclusion of that, but before I get to my findings, I want to address 2 issues that people had in the comment sections of the original video. First of all is the $700 price tag. One person was really upset that this was so expensive, but I'll start by saying that that's the point of these long-term evaluations, is to give a thorough, extensive test drive of a premium pen to help people understand what it's like to own one before making a decision or an investment on one. In addition, this is a specialty item. It's made by hand, one at a time with exotic materials, so it commands a price commensurate of an exotic small batch product. Some people had to design this pen and go through many prototypes, not just on the design, but also on the whole manufacturing process, and that costs money. That cost is part of this pen. Your giant pen makers like Pilot and Sailor and Pelican actually make more money than these small guys, not just because they can sell more pens, but they have made more pens. Every unit that the company makes reduces the portion of the R&D and marketing for that pen, so higher volumes lower the cost to produce them, economies of scale. So a small company like 50/40 who employs, I'm guessing, 5 to 8 people and who made only 250 of these pens can't really make them at the same scale that Pilot can. But here's the rub. Whether or not a company passes the savings from high volumes on to consumers is up to that company. Take Montblanc, for instance, and I've got one here. They've been making this Maestro Stick 149 since 1924, which means that this pen is a design that's 101 years old. By now, Montblanc should have the tooling worked out and all of it paid for decades ago, and maybe on their 3rd or 4th versions of those machines that they had originally made. Reliable material suppliers in place if they don't actually own them or control them otherwise, and quality control dialed in. And marketing, well, that's a given. Even people outside of the pen universe know what Montblanc is. But do you think they've passed that savings on to consumers? No, they've just lowered the quality. Here's a cardboard box inside of a cardboard box, inside of another cardboard box, inside of a flimsy piece of canvas that I think is polyester. It's see-through as well. And inside of that is a paper sleeve held closed by a sticker. And then you open up this, and we have the Montblanc here. Now, this video isn't about Montblanc, and I'm not trying to dig on Montblanc, although I think they're worthy of it. This pen here can be made much less expensive, and I know that's a fact because I have the exact same pen without the snow cap emblem at the top and without the Maestro Stick name on the center band, but it's 14 karat gold plated throughout. Same material of the body, same exact dimensions. The only thing that's different is that instead of an 18 karat gold nib, it has a 14 karat gold nib. Ebonite feed and everything. That pen cost me about $220. This one costs more than 5 times that. I look at companies like this and I think they're the ones that are charging too much, not companies like 50/40. So sorry to get all Slim Shady on you. I didn't mean to take down Montblanc, or especially if you're a person who loves Montblanc, more power to you. It just doesn't resonate with me. I just feel like this pen here is worth more than the Montblanc is to me. But if you're still not convinced about these reviews of expensive pens, I have other types of reviews that look at a variety of price points that you should probably take a look at instead. Some of these are the regular reviews, the unboxings, and the quick looks. Some others kindly asked if I would do a long-term review of a more approachable pens. And I'm currently looking into that. I have a few more Grail-like pens that I want to do first, but I'm also liking this idea, and I have a couple of nice choices in mind. I want to say that was the right way to bring that up. It was very thoughtful, so thank you very much. The second concern that was brought up in the comments, and this was just from one person, and they weren't angry or anything, I think I need to address that, and it is about the Titan filling system, TFS as they're calling it in shorthand. The comment was that it's too complicated. It's not really. I'm going to demonstrate that now. It's really my fault because I went into great detail explaining how it works. It's an unusual type of filler, and many of us don't own one, so I erred on the side of detail rather than hand waving. In my experience, this filler is easier to use, faster, cleaner, and very high volume at more than 4 milliliters. So let me demonstrate how long it takes. I explained how to fill it in the previous video. I'm just going to go ahead and do a full fill of this pen and show you how quickly it works. Now show me another pen where you can get 4 milliliters of ink that quickly into it. And while I have this out, I'm just going to show you another feature that is kind of a nice bonus from the filling mechanism, and that is how quickly you can flush this pen. Imagine I had some ink still stuck in here. You can simply dip it into some clean water and suck in some water and then push it out, and suck it in and then push it out, just like that over and over until you don't have any more ink showing up in the chamber. Now, there are some issues with that, which I'll get to here at the second half of this video. Okay, now for the results. I just covered what I liked about the filler, but there's something I didn't like too, and like I said, I'll get to that in a bit, but I want to go over the positives before I get into the more critical concerns. Number one, the pen performed really well the entire time. And when I say perform, I mean that it wrote well and the ink flowed as it should. It stopped when it should. No drying out after a day or two, no skips while writing. It just worked like a pen should. The ink flowed just as well in the first few seconds as it did 90 minutes later, which hasn't always been the case with some of these long-term reviews. You can thank the combination of the large number 8 nib and the ebonite feed for that. The nib was firm. It's steel. But it has a pleasant springiness to it, so I really enjoyed using that nib. So now is a good time to talk about how well it wrote, because I have said that the nib was nice and firm, yet had a bit of a bounce to it. Imagine a pogo stick. That doesn't flex. A pogo stick bounces, and that's how this felt when you needed it to. So these are my different papers that I used with my 3 different inks that I used. I will get into why I only used 3 inks later on. But basically, I just wanted to end this this long-term evaluation prematurely, but I just did the bare minimum here. So I can break this down into basically 2 groups. And those would be the ones that the pen spread a little bit, and that is both a combination of the ink and the paper, but also a little bit to do with the way the nib is ground. It is a fine nib, and this does not look like fine to me at all. That is Cosmo Air Snow, and that is the paper that's been giving me the spreading issues. So I am not going to be using Cosmo Air Snow in any more of my reviews, but I will include it in my kind of little binder that I have. It did show plenty of shading when it needed to, but I just don't understand why it needs to be that broad. To me, that looks like a broad or a double broad. I should probably measure that, but I just by eyeballing it, this is way too wide of a line width. The aerofil also spread, but not nearly as bad as the Cosmo Air Snow. And it seemed to be more so with the Serenity Blue, which surprised me, and the Parker Quink Black, which is supposed to be a drier ink, spread more than it did with the Aurora, which is supposed to be a drier black ink than Parker. I was a little bit confused about that, and I don't have any real explanations for it. Also, Grafilio seemed to be a little bit broad on the Serenity, whereas the Parker Quink and the Aurora behaved almost exactly the same. You could see these smear tests are almost the same length, whereas this one here was dry, yet it spread to be broad lines here. Very strange. Probably won't be using Grafilio much more in my personal life, but I will continue using it for these tests. For the plotter, which I was really glad to see, it behaved like I would expect it to behave. It had a very fine line, not too fine, not too broad. Again, the Waterman seemed to spread a little bit more than the Parker or the Aurora Black, but the way this felt just was wonderful, very smooth with just a little bit of feedback. It even seemed to be a little bit more tolerant of the nib being a little bit off horizontal. Plotter is something that I use every morning when I'm doing my daily planning and my habit tracking and my sleep tracking. All those things are all done in a plotter system. And so I'm really glad to see that worked. The sister paper to the plotter is Midori. They're both produced, or at least they're owned by the same parent company, which is Designfill, which I think used to be called Midori. I'm not sure about the whole lineage there, but these papers, as you can tell, behaved very similar. Midori paper is 90 GSM, and the plotter is 65 GSM, but we can look at the bleed through. I'm going to move these out of the way so you don't see through that. There is no show through on either case. There was this one pinhole here from the plotter paper, but that could have been me punching through the paper. I don't know. Or it could have just been a flaw in that sheet. The thing is that I want to point out on this one here, and this is sort of one of my complaints about Midori paper, is that because of the extra yellow milky or eggy color that they've added to this, it does lower the contrast and make it easier to read in brighter light and supposed to be less fatiguing on you. But also look what it's doing to the color. I mean, this shade of blue is not the same as this shade of blue here. This feels more bright and contrasty than this does here. This seems to be more it's like the paper is imbuing a little bit of the warmth to it, where this one is staying cool because the plotter paper is closer to bright white than the Midori paper is. But anyway, both papers behave the same as far as shading and the feel, felt, and all that. I do prefer the feel of Midori paper over plotter paper. I just like thicker papers in general, but there is something different about the texture of Midori paper as opposed to plotter paper or any other paper for that matter. Clairefontaine Triomphe. This is the whitest paper in the collection of test papers that I've got, and the pen worked great, felt great. This is the paper that I would use if I were writing a letter, and it's really wonderful for that. I mean, I think this just looks really elegant, except for my handwriting. It just felt really good. And one of the things I think is really interesting about Clairefontaine is that after you've written it, go write a letter with some Clairefontaine at some point. Use a fine nib or whatever your nib is, and then feel it. It's kind of like, I don't know, there's a texture that it leaves on the paper after you've written with it that, I don't know, feels engraved a little bit. And I just really like it. And it really shows off the color of the paper. And then lastly, We've got the Rhodia 80GSM dot paper, which I use in all of my videos for the writing samples. The performance of the pen on the papers is very similar, although Rhodia is a lot less expensive than Clairefontaine, which is a little bit strange because these two are owned by the same parent company. I think my favorites were in this order here. The way that it felt and the way it wrote was the Midori paper with the Aurora Black, followed by the Clairefontaine with the Aurora Black, and then the Plotter with Aurora Black. That would be a close second to the Clairefontaine. This design is pretty amazing. It's sleek and it's a real conversation starter. It looks modern in almost any decade. If I said that this was a modern looking pen in the year 2025, I could also say that this pen was a modern looking pen in 1974. It is not a classic design by any stretch of the mind, but it is definitely a timeless one. And I think they just really did a great job on the overall design and aesthetic of this pen. The third point I would say is an advantage of this pen, or one of its pluses, is that it's built like a tank, which is also a double-edged sword, and I'll get to that too in a bit, but it's very durable, perhaps overbuilt for what it is. Everything is titanium, grade 5 titanium, which is used in aerospace and medical equipment and food industry, and just every bit of it is titanium, with the exception of this crystal clear acrylic that they've used here. I mean, it's as clear as glass is, and it has not shown any signs of scratching or micro abrasions or anything like that the entire time I've owned it. So kudos to that. The only other parts that aren't titanium are, of course, the ebonite feed, and it has a steel nib, as I mentioned before, and the piston rod is also steel. It looks kind of yellow, and that's because it's been plated with titanium nitrate, and that makes it more resistant to corrosion. So given that this is acrylic and that is coated in titanium and the other parts of the body are titanium, I would say this is going to be impervious to just about any type of ink that you'd put into it, and that would include iron gall inks. And in fact, I am going to try using an iron gall ink in this pen at some point in the future. One other material that I haven't mentioned, but I kind of hinted towards earlier, is inside the cap, and that is Delrin. Now, Delrin is a type of plastic and used a lot in pens lately, and it is really easy to machine and provides a nice, secure seal. I think that is probably the reason that this pen has never dried out, is because of the Delrin liner that is on the inside of it here. You can feel this edge here hit the inside of the Delrin liner and create that seal. However, they went a step further, and I think this is an advantage that they have, 50/40, over other pen makers that just throw in a Delrin liner that fills up the entire cap. These titanium threads do not mate to that Delrin. They mate to these titanium threads in here. And then the Delrin liner starts above those. So the Delrin liner starts at about here, and the threads are about in here. And that is titanium to titanium threads instead of metal threads to plastic threads. And I think that's going to really increase the longevity of this pen. And then just one more thing I'm going to cover, and that is that the shutoff valve taken from the Japanese style eyedropper fillers, that has worked flawless. I've had this pen on 4 flights and never had a problem with it leaking at all. I've also thrown it in the bag and, gone on bike rides and whatnot, showed up a cafe an hour later and started writing with it, no ink all over the place. So it does what it's supposed to do. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were some problems with the pen that I will probably try to address. Some of these myself, and others I will just have to learn to live with. Others I hope 50/40 can address by themselves. I mean, this is an early model of this pen. I think this is the first of this design. It's going to change over time and become better over time. But at this point, there were some things about it that I don't like. Let's go over those. I also want to mention that this part of the review is very subjective, and a lot of the things that I didn't like about the pen probably won't bother a lot of people. And it also depends a lot on how often or how long you use this pen. The first thing was the Bock nib or Bock style nib. I never got a clear story on whether or not this is made by Bock and branded 50/40, or if it is actually made in-house to Bock specifications and just happens to be compatible. I don't know. And I'm not even going to guess how that went. I will say that I found it nice and springy and firm, but not hard at all. But the thing that bothered me about it was that it's very finicky about how parallel you hold it to the paper. Turn it just a little bit and it starts scratching. Now, this is one of those things that I could probably tune out myself or give it a try, but I wanted to use the pen as it came out of the box because I feel like that's part of the evaluation. You deserve to know what it's like out of the box. If you need to do some tuning on a $700 or $2,000 pen before you can start using it, it would be nice to know. The second piece of feedback I have is about the section. There's a slight waist to it, and as you can see, it's not completely cylindrical or conical. It has a nice kind of a curve to it, and so I thought I was going to like it better than I did. If this pen doesn't convince me that I'll ever love a steel or titanium grip, then I never will. And guess what? I'm not convinced. It's cold to the touch, it feels sweaty after prolonged periods, and the micro grooves are just too fine to provide any grip once your hands warm up. I found myself having to maintain an uncomfortable death grip in order to avoid losing control. Look, this is not a criticism of this pen in particular, but in pens with metal sections in general. If you enjoy metal grips, totally ignore what I just said. And here's another issue that isn't particular to this pen, but all or almost all piston pens. And I don't mean just these coned bulk filler style filling mechanisms. I mean anything with a piston in it. So if it's a piston filler or a vacuum filler, they all have a similar issue, and that is trying to get the darn things cleaned out. A lot of the time, you will find yourself with a situation where you've got ink on both sides of the piston, and once it gets on the top side, it gets very hard to clean out. What I do is I submerge the whole thing into the water and push it this way and then that way, and it's forcing water in and then out of it on both directions as I do that. And that helps somewhat, but it never gets the moisture out. And in fact, you can see right now there's plenty of moisture in here and ink, and I haven't had any ink in this thing and tried to clear it out dozens of times. So that's kind of an issue, but 50/40 made that issue a little bit worse for themselves, at least in this earlier version of this pen, and I hope this is something they address in the future. Two things. One is this part is not removable. It looks like it's threaded, but that's how it was constructed. It's not designed to be removed, and you can't buy the tool to remove it. Second of all, they don't want you to remove the feed and nib, and that would be another way to get in and clean this end out. So basically, they gave you a pen that you can't thoroughly clean, and for $700, I think they need to revisit that. You've got companies like TWSBI who can do it for 1/10 of the price, allow it to be owner serviceable, and they even include the tool to remove the section at the top in the box for that $60. Of all the things I didn't like about this pen, this was probably the most annoying and the one that I think would be the easiest for them to fix. My fourth concern is not one that I feel is too subjective. I think this one is more objective. I found communicating with service fairly lacking. I wrote them once to ask them about purchasing another nib, and it took weeks before I heard back from them. The answer was a little bit vague, and I asked a follow-up question and never heard back from them. Well, I think that's really poor customer service and that they need to revisit that. And then I think the last thing I need to mention is the overall weight of this pen. It's just too heavy for me to use for, the morning daily planning and note-taking. There's no issue with that at all. It's perfectly fine. But when I'm going 45 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours writing, this becomes very tiresome and very uncomfortable, very painful, actually. And you combine the death grip that I need to hold onto the section with and the additional weight of the pen, and those two things combine to make a very uncomfortable writer for long writing sessions. I'm going to illustrate my point a little bit, and I'm only going to weigh the body of the pen because I don't use larger pens posted. Generally speaking, there's one pen that I do. I prefer that way, but for most pens, including this one here, I don't. And you can see right now it's 28.6 grams without the cap. And the cap just makes it even worse. Now let's do a comparison with the Sailor King of Pen. This is an ebonite pen, and it is got a finish that is Urushi lacquer, Iromiyabi, and it is not a light pen either, but I've tared this, so 0 would be the correct weight for it. And the King of Pen is 6.1 grams less. Now I'm going to even go a step further and compare it to the largest pen in my collection, which is this ridiculous Ranga pen. It's just enormous. I mean, I look like a kid holding onto a crayon with this thing. It's so big. This pen here, just the body, so I can get it balanced there, is only 1.2 grams more than this one is here. And it's a lot larger. If you think back to my criticisms about this pen, they're all subjective to me and may or may not apply to you. With the exception of the customer support, I think that is something that is more objective. Whether or not those things that bothered me are the same things that are going to bother you is something that only you can answer. And I guess what I'm saying is that, take what I said with a grain of salt. If you like this sleek, futuristic, modern design, if you want a bulletproof pen that won't leak or ever dry out, if you want a conversation starter, if you think heavier pens give you more control while you're writing, if metal sections don't seem to be a problem for you, and if you've got the scratch, the 50/40 Titan might be the right pen for you. Well, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out. And come join us on the Patreon. It's free to join, and I'm doing some giveaways right now. Thanks for watching. Be well.